It's late afternoon, and the subway is bustling with its usual mix of hurried commuters, tired travelers, and curious onlookers. The clatter of train wheels against the tracks, the dull hum of the fluorescent lights, and the slight scent of fast food fill the air. It's the kind of day where everything feels ordinary, until something extraordinary happens. Imagine this: you're standing there, waiting for the train to arrive, when a sudden rush of wind blows through the station. No, it's not the breeze from the train doors, it's something far more subtle, far more strange. A letter falls from the sky, seemingly out of nowhere, and lands softly at your feet. You bend down to pick it up, wondering who could have dropped it. But as your fingers graze the envelope, you realize it's not just any letter. This one feels different. It's handwritten, the paper worn with age, and there's something oddly personal about it, almost as if it's meant for you. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, what's the big deal? You're thinking, it's just a letter, right? But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. You open the envelope, only to discover that it's not addressed to anyone you know. It's not even addressed to anyone in particular. The letter, though, reveals something incredible, a message that seems to speak to a deep, hidden part of you. It's not just a stranger's letter, it feels as though the letter has been waiting for you. And, just as you're trying to make sense of it all, something even stranger happens. As the days pass, the letter's words start to haunt you. They linger in your thoughts, pulling you into a mystery that you never asked for, but now can't escape. But it doesn't stop there. The next day, while you're sitting on the same subway platform, you see a familiar face. A stranger, someone you've never met before, steps up next to you. They don't say a word. They don't need to. In their hand, there's another letter, a letter that's not a reply, but a continuation of the first. And that's when you realize, this isn't just a coincidence. There's something much deeper going on. Something you're now caught in. Let me ask you, what would you do if a stranger started delivering messages meant for you? And what if those messages began to uncover secrets about your life, your past, things that you never knew existed? And what if you found yourself tangled in a web of fate, mystery, and chance? The answer to those questions, well, that's what I'm going to reveal to you today. Stick with me, because I promise, by the end of this story, you'll have the answers to questions you never even thought to ask. And trust me, you won't want to miss a single twist. I'm about to take you on a ride you'll never forget, one that explores the thin lines between fate, destiny, and the power of a single letter that changed everything. But here's the catch: just when you think you know where this story is headed, it will turn in a direction you never saw coming. The truth, my friend, is far stranger than fiction. So, grab a seat, buckle up, and let's dive into a story that begins with a letter on the subway but unravels into something much, much bigger. What happens next will change everything. Keep watching, because the answers are just around the corner. Life hadn't been easy for Emily. She'd always been a person who preferred to keep to herself, more of a listener than a talker, a quiet observer rather than an active participant. It wasn't that she didn't crave connection, it was just that life had a way of pushing people away. Whether it was the early death of her mother when she was a teenager, the strained relationship with her father, or the string of failed friendships and romances that never seemed to last, Emily had grown accustomed to being alone. The loneliness had, over time, become her comfort zone. But lately, even her solitude had felt different. Almost suffocating. It was the kind of feeling that builds up slowly, like an unspoken weight pressing down on your chest. Her days had started to blur into one another. She'd wake up early, grab a coffee, and head to her job as a freelance graphic designer. The work wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. She'd sit in front of her computer for hours on end, pushing pixels around the screen, staring at a blank canvas and hoping something would spark. But nothing ever did. At night, she'd retreat to her apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a building that felt as empty as she did. There were no parties, no late-night talks with friends. No one to share her thoughts with. Just the sound of the city outside her window and the occasional chirp of a distant bird in the morning. It was a routine that had become her life. Emily hadn't been expecting anything to change. She wasn't looking for adventure. She wasn't seeking out some life-altering event. But when she found that letter, something shifted. That was the thing about life, sometimes it throws things your way when you least expect it. And that letter felt like one of those things. At first, she chalked it up to coincidence. After all, she was a practical person. The kind of person who believed in logic, who believed that if you follow a certain path, you'll get predictable results. But the words in the letter didn't make sense. They spoke to her in a way that no stranger's words ever had. It was as if the letter knew her fears, her desires, the things she'd never told anyone. She had tried to brush it off at first. Tried to convince herself that it was just a fluke, that maybe someone else had lost it, or maybe it was part of some weird marketing campaign. But when the second letter appeared, delivered not by the usual postman, but by a mysterious figure at the subway station, Emily couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't just a strange coincidence. Something was happening. Something that was beyond her understanding. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that this wasn't a random event. Someone had to be behind it. But who? And why her? Was it someone from her past, someone she'd long since forgotten about? Someone who had been watching her, studying her, waiting for the right moment to make their move? Or was it someone she'd never met before, someone who somehow knew everything about her life, even the things she'd never told anyone? The first person who came to mind was Greg. He had been Emily's ex-boyfriend, the one who had promised her everything but ultimately left her heartbroken when he chose someone else. He had a way of showing up unexpectedly, always with that charm that seemed to win people over, even when they knew better. Emily had thought he was gone for good. But had he been lurking in the shadows, planning this strange game? She remembered the way he had always seemed to know exactly what to say, how to get under her skin. He could be manipulative in a way that left you questioning everything you thought you knew. But was he really the one behind these letters, or was she simply letting her mind wander to old wounds? Then there was Sarah, Emily's childhood friend. They had grown up together, but their paths had drifted apart when Sarah moved to the West Coast. Their communication had been sporadic at best, but there was something unsettling about how Sarah had reached out to her a few weeks ago, asking about her life in a way that felt too probing. Was she really just checking in, or had she been involved in something darker? Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah knew more than she was letting on. But why would Sarah go through all this trouble? What could she possibly gain? And then there was the mysterious figure at the subway. Emily had never seen him before, but there was something about his presence that felt both familiar and threatening at the same time. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and a hat that obscured his face, but his eyes, those eyes, seemed to stare right through her. When he handed her the second letter, his fingers brushed against hers, sending a cold shiver up her spine. He hadn't said a word. He didn't need to. His presence alone spoke volumes. Who was he, and why did he know about the letter she had received? Emily had tried to ignore it all, tried to convince herself it was just some twisted coincidence. But with each passing day, the weight of the situation grew heavier. The letters kept coming, each one more cryptic than the last. The more she read, the more questions piled up, and the more it seemed like someone very close, was pulling the strings. Was it someone trying to make her confront her past? Someone who knew her secrets? Or was this some kind of elaborate game meant to test her, to push her to the brink? Each letter raised more questions than it answered, and with every new clue, Emily found herself spiraling deeper into uncertainty. Nothing felt real anymore. Not the people around her, not the world she had built for herself. It was like someone had flipped the switch, and now she was trapped in a story she couldn't control. And the strangest part? The more Emily tried to resist it, the more she felt drawn to the mystery. The questions gnawed at her. She couldn't walk away, couldn't turn her back, because deep down, she knew this wasn't just about the letters anymore. This was about her. About finding out what had been hidden from her for so long, even if it meant confronting the darkest parts of herself. But as the tension built, and the web of connections grew ever more tangled, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just being watched, she was being guided. Something, or someone, was pushing her toward the answers. But who, and why? And just when she thought she had the situation figured out, another letter arrived, this one slipping into her mailbox with a quiet rustle, a whisper in the dark that told her the truth was closer than she thought. But what would she find when she opened it? Was she ready to face whatever lay hidden beneath the surface? The clock was ticking, and with each passing moment, Emily knew one thing for sure: the answers were coming. But so were the dangers. As the days passed, Emily found herself falling deeper into a mystery that seemed to have no end. Each letter she received led her further down a winding path, with clues that opened more doors, only to reveal even more questions. But as much as she was driven by the need to know the truth, there were forces at play, some obvious, others hidden, that made it increasingly difficult to find the answers she sought. One afternoon, as Emily was going over the latest letter in her small, cluttered apartment, a sudden thought hit her. The envelope from the subway station, the one with the second letter, might have been the key to unraveling everything. She had tossed it aside in her haste, but now, she felt an urgency to examine it more closely. Something in the paper's texture, in the ink, in the way the envelope was sealed, it felt different from the others. She rushed to her desk, carefully retrieved the envelope from the drawer, and began to examine it more thoroughly. That's when she noticed something odd. There was a faint mark on the back, almost like a symbol, hidden beneath the folds. It wasn't a typical stamp or a printed design. It was something personal, like a seal, but it wasn't like anything she had ever seen before. She squinted, trying to make sense of the obscure pattern, but before she could even snap a photo to preserve the detail, something strange happened. The envelope, still in her hands, slipped from her grasp and fluttered to the floor. Emily bent down to pick it up, but when she reached for it, she froze. The envelope was gone. Disappeared, as though it had never been there at all. Her apartment was small, nothing more than a single room with a kitchen nook and a bathroom. There was nowhere for it to go. She checked every corner, every shelf, every drawer, even the trash can, but the envelope along with the mysterious mark was gone. For a moment, Emily stood there, motionless, her heart racing. Had she imagined it? Was it some kind of trick her mind was playing on her? She didn't think so. The mark was real. It had been right there. She hadn't imagined it. This wasn't just a mistake, something was trying to stop her from uncovering the truth. She could feel it deep in her gut. Someone, some force, was trying to keep her in the dark, to keep her from discovering what was really going on. But who? And why? Frustration bubbled up inside her. She couldn't let this go. The letters, the mysterious man, the strange disappearances, they were all too connected to be a coincidence. Emily had to keep going, but there was a growing sense that the deeper she dug, the more she was being pulled into a web of secrets, one that had been carefully woven around her life for years, if not longer. That evening, she decided to take a walk to clear her mind. Maybe the fresh air would help her think, help her regain some clarity. She found herself at the edge of the city, near an old bookstore she liked to visit. It was a quiet place, tucked away from the busy streets, with rows upon rows of dusty bookshelves filled with novels, history books, and forgotten stories. She had always felt at home there, away from the noise and distractions of the world. But as she walked inside, something felt off. The air was thick with dust, and the dim lighting cast long, eerie shadows across the aisles. There was a soft murmur of voices in the back, but no one she recognized. Emily was about to leave when she saw him again, the man from the subway. He was standing near the counter, flipping through a book, his back turned to her. Her heart skipped a beat. Was this another coincidence, or was he following her? Before she could think about it, he turned and saw her. His eyes met hers for a brief moment, and then he smiled, a smile that sent chills down her spine. Without saying a word, he motioned for her to come closer. Emily hesitated but couldn't help herself. She walked toward him, her mind racing. What did he want? What did he know? When she reached him, he didn't speak right away. He just stood there, looking at her with an intensity that made her uneasy. Then, in a low voice, he said, "You're getting too close. You don't understand what you're involved in." His words were quiet, almost a whisper, but they struck her with the force of a warning. You need to stop digging. For your own safety. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. What was he talking about? Was he trying to intimidate her into giving up? Or was he genuinely concerned for her well-being? She couldn't tell, but something in his eyes told her he wasn't lying. The weight of his words hung in the air, thick with tension, and for a moment, she wondered if it would be easier to just walk away, forget about the letters, forget about the mystery. But she couldn't. Not now. Not when she was this close to understanding the truth. Why? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Why should I stop? What do you know? The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked toward the back of the bookstore, disappearing behind a bookshelf before she could react. Emily stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. What was that about? Why did he warn her? And why, after all this time, had he shown up now? As she walked toward the exit, something caught her eye. It was a small piece of paper, wedged between two books on a nearby shelf. Without thinking, she picked it up. The paper was old, yellowed with age, and it had been folded multiple times. She opened it slowly, and there, scrawled in dark ink, was a message: "You're looking in the wrong places. The answers are closer than you think." Emily's heart pounded as she read the words. It didn't make sense. Was it from the man at the bookstore? Or someone else entirely? Who was trying to mislead her, and why? She stuffed the note into her bag and left the bookstore, her mind spinning. The night air felt colder than usual, and the streets seemed darker, more ominous. Something was happening, something bigger than she could comprehend. Someone was trying to steer her off course, but Emily wasn't about to let that stop her. As she walked back to her apartment, the weight of the day's events settled heavily on her shoulders. Whoever was behind this, whatever secret they were trying to hide, was closing in. And just when she thought she was on the verge of finding out the truth, the pieces of the puzzle started to slip through her fingers, like sand in the wind. And as Emily reached for her apartment door, she noticed something strange. A new letter slipped beneath the crack in the door, waiting for her. This one felt different, though. She could tell from the weight of it, from the way it was pressed against the floor. She bent down to pick it up, heart racing. Was this the final piece of the puzzle? Or was it another layer of deception? With trembling hands, Emily tore open the envelope, the silence around her deepening as she read the words inside. The letter was short, but it sent a chill down her spine. You were never supposed to find out. But now it's too late. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Who was they? And what had she uncovered that she wasn't supposed to know? With the final words of the letter echoing in her mind, Emily knew she had crossed a line from which there would be no return. But what would she do now? And who could she trust? The answers were closer than ever, but the closer she got, the more dangerous the path became. Emily stood frozen in her doorway, the letter still trembling in her hand. She could feel the weight of its words sinking deep into her chest, a knot forming in her stomach. You were never supposed to find out. But now it's too late. It was the kind of message that didn't just imply danger, it promised it. It made it clear that whatever forces were pulling the strings had known she would uncover the truth, that this wasn't some random set of events spiraling out of control. No, this was orchestrated. And she had just crossed into dangerous territory. The night had become oppressive, thick with the tension of everything she had learned and everything she still didn't know. She couldn't shake the feeling that the net was closing in, that she was being watched, that every move she made was already anticipated by whoever was behind this intricate game. As she paced around her small apartment, trying to make sense of the letter's ominous message, her phone buzzed unexpectedly. It was a text from her best friend, Sarah. I need to talk to you. It's about the letters. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Sarah had been a constant in her life, someone who knew everything about her well, almost everything. They had been friends for years, sharing everything from childhood secrets to the ups and downs of adult life. She had never been the type to believe in conspiracy theories or hidden messages, but recently, something had shifted in Sarah's behavior, a subtle change that Emily had chalked up to stress. But now, with Sarah reaching out in the middle of the night, something felt off. She couldn't remember a time when Sarah had seemed so urgent, so frantic. After a moment of hesitation, Emily texted back, "What's going on? What do you know?" The reply came almost instantly. "I found something. I can't explain it over text, but meet me at the park in 15 minutes. You won't believe it, Em." A chill ran down Emily's spine. The park, of course. That was their spot, the place they had gone since high school to talk, vent, or just hang out. But now it felt like a trap. And Sarah was walking right into it. She grabbed her jacket and left her apartment without another thought. The cool night air hit her face as she stepped outside, the city around her seeming to hum with energy, but also something darker, something foreboding. As she walked to the park, her mind raced. What could Sarah possibly have found? Could she be connected to all of this, too? Emily had always trusted her friend, but lately, there had been moments, small, almost imperceptible moments, when Sarah had seemed distracted, often in a way that was difficult to put into words. And now, just as Emily had stumbled upon a hidden message that had changed everything, Sarah seemed to be unraveling something of her own. When she arrived at the park, Sarah was sitting on their usual bench, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched something in her lap. Emily rushed over, heart pounding in her chest. As she sat beside her, Sarah barely glanced up, her eyes distant, almost haunted. I don't know what to make of this," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. She held up a crumpled envelope. It was identical to the one Emily had received that morning, same worn paper, same mysterious seal on the back. Emily's stomach dropped. The letter. Another one? Where did you get this? Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Sarah swallowed hard, her hands shaking as she handed it over. I found it at the office. It was hidden inside one of the files. At first, I thought it was just a mistake, some kind of old document someone had forgotten about. But then I saw the seal, and I knew. I knew it was the same as the one you got. She paused, her eyes wide with fear. And that's not even the worst part. Emily took the letter from her, heart racing. She tore it open quickly, the paper crackling in her hands. Inside, there was a single line of text. You are already a part of this. You've been involved from the very beginning. Before Emily could respond, the line went dead. She stood there, phone in hand, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The weight of what Daniel had said pressed down on her, suffocating her. The truth. What truth? What was he talking about? And who could she trust now? Sarah? Daniel? Was anyone who they claimed to be? Emily looked around her apartment, the walls closing in on her as the room felt smaller, darker. Her entire world was crumbling, piece by piece, and the answers were slipping further out of reach. She wasn't just caught in a game anymore, she was the game. And the more she fought to uncover the truth, the more she realized that the truth might be something far worse than she could have ever imagined. As she sank into the chair by her window, she whispered to herself, I don't know who I am anymore. And in that moment, she realized that she might never get the answer she so desperately sought. Because the truth wasn't just hidden. It was buried deep, and someone was willing to make sure it stayed that way, at any cost. Emily sat there in the stillness of her apartment, the weight of everything crashing down on her like a tidal wave. Her mind raced, her thoughts too jumbled to process clearly, but the one thing that was undeniably clear was that she was being pushed to the brink. Every step she took closer to the truth seemed to push her further into a labyrinth of lies, manipulation, and danger. She had trusted people who were now turning into shadows, fading figures whose motives were anything but clear. And now, it was clear, she was running out of time. The danger wasn't just in the shadows outside her window, waiting to pounce. The danger was everywhere. It was inside her apartment, inside her mind. She couldn't escape it. She couldn't escape them. The phone call with Daniel had left her reeling. The implications of his words, the slow unraveling of her past, it all felt like a nightmare. And just when she thought she had a grasp on things, just when she thought she was starting to make sense of it all, there was a knock at the door. At first, she froze, unsure if it was another trick, another mind game designed to push her to the edge. She knew whoever was on the other side had been watching her every move, had been orchestrating this whole thing like some twisted puppet master. The thought made her stomach churn, but she couldn't avoid the inevitable. She couldn't keep hiding from the truth, even if it terrified her. With shaking hands, she reached for the door handle. As she slowly opened it, her heart skipped a beat. Standing in front of her wasn't some shadowy figure or masked intruder. It was Sarah. Her friend. But she didn't look the same. There was a coldness to her expression, a blankness in her eyes that sent an icy shiver down Emily's spine. It was like the Sarah she knew was gone, replaced by someone else entirely. Emily, Sarah said softly, her voice almost mechanical. We need to talk. Emily didn't know what to say. She didn't know if she was supposed to feel relieved or more terrified than ever. What's going on, Sarah? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why have you been keeping all these secrets from me? Sarah stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her movements deliberate, controlled. The door clicked shut behind her, and Emily felt a new sense of dread building in her chest. I didn't want you to get hurt, Sarah said quietly, her gaze distant. But now you're too deep in this. We both are. Emily's pulse quickened. Too deep in what? Sarah, I don't understand. All these messages, the threats, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me? You knew what was going on, didn't you? You knew something I didn't. For a moment, Sarah didn't respond. She just stood there, like she was weighing her next words carefully, choosing them with an intensity that felt suffocating. Emily could feel the tension in the room building, a pressure that made it hard to breathe. Then, Sarah finally spoke again, and when she did, her voice trembled, barely audible. I didn't have a choice, Emily, she said, her eyes meeting Emily's for the first time in what felt like forever. They have leverage over me. Over both of us. You don't understand what's at stake here. What do you mean leverage? Emily demanded, her fear now blending with a rising sense of anger. What have you done, Sarah? What are you involved in? Why didn't you tell me? I trusted you. Sarah flinched at the words, the raw hurt evident in her expression. I never wanted this, Emily. But it's too late. We're both in this now. There's no way out. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, Emily saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. They've been watching us for years. They've been waiting for the right moment to pull us in. Who? Emily's voice was barely a whisper, the words catching in her throat. She couldn't bring herself to believe it. She had thought they were just random threats, random games. But this was something much darker, much bigger. Who is they? What do they want with us? Sarah looked around, her eyes darting nervously toward the window, as if expecting someone to be lurking outside, waiting for the right moment to strike. I can't tell you everything. I wish I could, but if I do, they'll hurt you. They'll hurt both of us. Emily's heart hammered in her chest. Every part of her screamed for answers, for the truth. But with every word Sarah spoke, she realized that getting the truth might cost her more than she was willing to pay. And then, just as Emily opened her mouth to demand more, her phone buzzed again. The message was from an unknown number, and as she glanced at it, her blood ran cold. You have one choice, Emily. The clock is ticking. Choose wisely. One of us must pay the price for your curiosity. Emily's hand trembled as she held the phone, the weight of the ultimatum crashing down on her. The message felt like a final warning. She wasn't just playing with fire anymore, she was about to get burned. And there was no way to turn back. Sarah, what does this mean? Emily whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. What do they want me to do? Who is this? Sarah swallowed hard, looking down at the ground, unable to meet Emily's eyes. It's not just about you, Emily. You think you're the only one caught in this, but you're not. There's more at stake than you know. They've been pulling the strings from the beginning, and if you keep pushing, they'll destroy everything. They'll destroy me. They'll destroy you. We'll both be collateral damage. A thick silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken fears and choices too grave to make. Emily's chest tightened, her mind spinning as she processed everything. The messages. The threats. The cryptic warnings. The photo with Daniel. It was all starting to make a terrifying kind of sense, but that only made it worse. And if I don't choose? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah didn't answer right away. She took a step back, as if trying to distance herself from the weight of Emily's question. Finally, she spoke, but her voice was hollow, resigned. Then we both lose. And it won't just be us. It'll be everyone we care about. They'll make sure of it. Emily felt her world shatter in that moment, the ground beneath her feet slipping away. She wasn't just faced with a choice between safety and truth. She was being asked to decide between the safety of herself and the safety of everyone she loved. No matter what she chose, there would be a cost. And the more she thought about it, the more the weight of the decision crushed her. Was she ready to pay that price? Was she willing to let someone else bear the brunt of her choices, even if it meant she could finally uncover the truth? Or was it safer to keep her head down, pretend she didn't know anything, and let the shadows close in around her? But deep down, she knew one thing: there was no going back now. Every step forward was a step into the unknown. And no matter what she chose, the danger was already here. The clock was ticking. And she didn't have much time left. The phone buzzed again, shattering the tense silence that had fallen between Emily and Sarah. She didn't even need to look at the screen to know what it was. Another message. Another threat. The weight of the ultimatum hung over her like a storm cloud, suffocating her, making it impossible to think clearly. Every time she tried to breathe, her chest tightened, each inhale feeling more like a desperate gasp for air. She had to make a decision. She had to choose. But the walls were closing in on her, and the more she tried to pull back, the more the shadows surrounded her. She could hear her pulse in her ears, a constant reminder that time was slipping away, 1 second at a time. Emily, Sarah's voice broke through the chaos in her mind. You have to trust me. But Emily couldn't. Not anymore. Her mind was spinning with images of everything that had happened in the past few days. The messages, the photographs, Daniel's cryptic words, and Sarah's cold, detached behavior. All the pieces were there, but none of it made sense, not until now. And the more Sarah spoke, the more it became clear, there was no simple explanation for any of this. They were in deeper than they ever imagined, and the conspiracy was much larger, more complex, and more dangerous than she could have ever anticipated. Trust you. Emily's voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. How am I supposed to trust you, Sarah? How can I trust anyone anymore? You've been lying to me. All of you have been lying. Sarah flinched, as though Emily's words physically struck her, but the tension in the room only thickened. It's not that simple, Sarah said, her voice cracking, but there was something more in her eyes now, something that looked almost like regret, like she was trapped in this just as much as Emily was. You don't know what you're dealing with. You don't know who's behind all this. Emily didn't want to hear it anymore. She couldn't. The truth felt like shards of glass digging into her skin, and yet, the more she tried to pull away from it, the sharper it became. Everything she thought she understood about her life, about the people she loved, was a lie. The mystery, the threats, it was all part of something much larger, something that had been brewing for longer than she realized. And in the back of her mind, the terrible suspicion that the very people she had trusted most were the ones who had betrayed her, who had pulled her into this nightmare, began to form like a shadow she couldn't escape. Then it hit her, the connection she had missed all along. The letters, the messages, the photograph of Daniel. It wasn't just some random game. It wasn't a coincidence. Sarah wasn't the only one involved. Daniel wasn't just a pawn, either. He was part of the bigger picture, too. But there was more. So much more. She wasn't the only target. This wasn't just about her. It was about something much larger. Something bigger than the people who had been manipulating her. The thought came crashing down on her, and it made her stomach drop. The conspiracy wasn't just a web of lies around her. It was a network, stretching far beyond what she had thought. The people involved weren't just random strangers, they were connected, with their own agendas, their own power. This wasn't just about her safety. It was about keeping an entire world of secrets buried, about controlling people like her, people who had been used, pushed, manipulated into this fight for survival. The truth was uglier than she could have ever imagined. This wasn't just some random act of terror, it was systematic. Carefully crafted. A machine of control that ran deep, hidden in plain sight. Sarah, Emily's voice broke, the words coming out barely above a whisper. Who else is involved? Sarah's eyes flickered, and for a moment, Emily could see something in her friend's face that wasn't just fear, it was guilt. And then, without warning, Sarah took a step back, almost as if she were preparing herself for something. They all are, Sarah finally whispered. Even the people you trust. The people you think are safe. She paused, her breath hitching. I never wanted you to know. I never wanted you to be part of this. But it's too late. You've been marked, Emily. And they'll come for you. They'll come for everyone. Before Emily could react, there was another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't a message or a cryptic phone call. This was real. This was physical. A presence, too strong to ignore. Emily's heart stopped in her chest. Who was it now? Was it Daniel? Someone else from the twisted web of people she could no longer trust? The door swung open before she could get to it, and standing in the threshold was someone she never expected to see, Detective Callahan, the very person she thought had been trying to help her. The one she'd confided in, the one who had seemed like a steady hand in all this chaos. But now, as she saw him standing there, his face pale, his eyes distant and cold, she realized with a sickening clarity that she had been played. Callahan wasn't here to help her. He was part of the trap. "Detective," Emily said, her voice shaking as she stepped back, her breath coming in quick bursts. "What are you doing here? What do you want?" Callahan didn't answer right away. He just stood there, his eyes cold, almost pitying. "It's over, Emily," he said, his voice flat, like he had resigned himself to whatever was about to happen. "You should have stayed out of this. You should have never gotten involved." In that moment, it hit her like a ton of bricks. Callahan wasn't a friend. He was an agent of the conspiracy, a part of the network she had been so desperately trying to unravel. All the times she'd trusted him, all the advice he'd given her, it had all been calculated, a part of the larger plan to keep her in the dark. He had been watching her from the start, just like everyone else. He had been a wolf in sheep's clothing, luring her deeper into the web until she couldn't escape. Emily took a step back, panic flooding her chest as the room seemed to spin. "No," she gasped, her mind struggling to make sense of the betrayal. "No, you can't, this isn't possible. You can't be part of this. You." But Callahan was already stepping forward, his face hardening into something that was no longer familiar, no longer human. "You never had a choice, Emily. You've been part of the plan all along. This was always going to happen." In that moment, Emily knew there was no one left she could trust. No one was who they seemed. The conspiracy had its claws deep in every corner of her life. And now, the walls were closing in. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. "Get out," she demanded, her voice growing stronger as adrenaline kicked in. But Callahan only smiled, a cruel, empty smile that made her blood run cold. "I'm afraid it's too late for that," he said, his words final, sealing her fate. And just like that, the walls of her world crashed down, and Emily was left standing in the wreckage, realizing that the truth she'd been chasing was far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The stakes were higher than ever. And this time, the game had changed. The room was thick with the heavy weight of silence, the tension palpable. Emily stood there, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps, as the full weight of everything she'd discovered, the conspiracy, the lies, the betrayal, pressed down on her chest like an iron vice. Detective Callahan, the man she had trusted more than anyone, stood before her, a cold, calculating look in his eyes, as if this moment had been scripted long ago. The walls of the apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like they were closing in on her, and the world outside seemed a distant memory, a place she could never return to. "Why?" she whispered, the word barely escaping her lips. "Why did you do this? Why me?" Callahan didn't immediately respond. His face was unreadable, his movements controlled, as though every action, every word, was a calculated part of some grand scheme. It took him a moment, but when he finally spoke, his voice was devoid of any emotion, as if he were reciting a line from a script. "You were always part of this, Emily. You just didn't know it." He stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. "You thought you were trying to uncover the truth, but the truth has always been right in front of you. You were never meant to know. The people you thought were on your side, they were all working for the same thing. You were just too close to the answer." Her pulse hammered in her ears, the room spinning as she processed his words. Everything she had fought for, every sleepless night spent chasing leads, it had all been part of a trap. The clues, the messages, the faces that had turned into strangers, everything had been manipulated from the start. She had been nothing more than a pawn in a game she couldn't even comprehend. "No," Emily's voice cracked, her fists clenched at her sides, her mind reeling. "You're lying. This wasn't just some game. This was real. People are dead because of this. People were hurt. The anger, the hurt, it surged up inside of her like a wave crashing against a cliff, and for a brief moment, she felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't going to let him twist the truth anymore. She wasn't going to be a victim. Callahan's lips curled into a thin, almost amused smile. You still don't get it, do you? He took another step toward her, his voice low and dangerous. This was never about you, Emily. This was never about your life or your death. It's bigger than that. You were just a piece of a much larger plan. A plan that's been in motion for years. And now, he paused, letting the silence hang between them like a dark cloud. Now, it's too late for you. The air felt heavier now, the words hanging over her like a noose. Emily could feel the walls pressing in on her, the weight of everything crashing down on her. She wasn't sure if it was the adrenaline or the reality of what was happening that made her heart beat so fast, but in that moment, something snapped inside of her. She wasn't going to stand there and let Callahan control the narrative. She wasn't going to let him win. With a sudden movement, she darted toward the desk in the corner of the room, her eyes scanning for anything that could help. Her fingers brushed over a stack of papers, a thick folder she hadn't noticed before. Her heart skipped a beat as she flipped it open, the contents spilling across the desk like a horrifying truth she had been too blind to see. Photographs. Documents. Evidence that, if she pieced it together, would finally make sense of everything that had happened and everyone involved. Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages, each one revealing more than she could have imagined. There were names, dates, locations, everything tied together by one chilling common thread. The conspiracy wasn't just some faceless group of people, it was organized. The strings were pulled by people with power, people in positions that made them untouchable. This wasn't just about secrets anymore. This was about control. About manipulating entire systems, entire lives, to feed their own twisted agendas. And right there, on the last page, was the final piece of the puzzle, a name that made her blood run cold. Sarah. The shock hit her like a punch to the gut. She had trusted Sarah. She had thought of her as a friend, someone who had been caught in the same web of lies. But the truth was worse than anything she could have imagined. Sarah had been working for them all along. She had been feeding information to Callahan. She had played Emily from the start. Sarah, Emily whispered, her mind racing to process everything. You were never my friend, were you? Callahan's smile widened, as if the truth had finally dawned on her. She wasn't, Emily. None of them were. You were always meant to be a part of the plan, just like the rest of them. He took another step forward, his presence looming over her. The truth is, you've been chasing shadows, and now you're finally starting to understand the bigger picture. It's a game, Emily. And you lost. The words hit her like a brick, but there was something in the way Callahan spoke, something that made her pause, that made her question everything she thought she knew. He wasn't just the mastermind of some petty scheme. He was a cog in a much larger machine, and now Emily was caught in its gears, unable to escape. But then, just as she was beginning to lose all hope, something shifted. Something inside of her clicked into place. Emily wasn't just a pawn anymore. She wasn't going to let herself be another casualty in this twisted game. Her eyes locked onto the phone on the desk, the one she'd been ignoring for so long, and a wave of realization hit her. In one swift motion, she grabbed the phone and slammed it against the desk, watching as the screen shattered into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't just her. This wasn't something that could be explained away as a coincidence. Emily felt a sinking sensation in her stomach as she looked at Sarah. Her best friend wasn't just a bystander. She was in this. She had been in this all along. Sarah, what is this? Emily's voice was trembling now, and she couldn't stop herself from feeling the weight of the implications. If Sarah had been involved all along, then that meant everything had been planned. This wasn't some random chain of events, it was orchestrated, a puzzle piece that had been waiting for the right time to fall into place. Do you know anything about this? Anything at all? Sarah shook her head, her eyes welling with tears. I don't know what's happening. But when I found the letter, I started going through the files at work, trying to figure out who could have left it there. And that's when I found something else. Something that makes no sense. Emily's mind raced. Was Sarah trying to tell her something? What had she uncovered? And why hadn't she told Emily about it sooner? The questions kept mounting, but there were no easy answers. Tell me, Emily urged, her voice tight with fear. What did you find? Sarah took a shaky breath and pulled out a folded piece of paper from her bag, one that looked different from the letter, cleaner and more formal. She handed it over to Emily, who unfolded it slowly. It was a photograph, a grainy, black and white image of a group of people, gathered around an old table. The faces were obscured, but in the middle of the photo was a familiar figure. Emily's heart skipped a beat. It was her. But it wasn't just her. There was something wrong with the photo. It was old, much older than anything Emily could remember. The people in the picture looked like they were from another time, another era. And yet, there was no mistaking it. She was there, standing in the middle of the group, a younger version of herself, a version she didn't recognize. How could this be? I don't understand, Emily whispered, her fingers trembling as she stared at the photograph. This doesn't make sense. How is this possible? Why is this happening now? Sarah's voice cracked. That's what I was trying to figure out. Who are these people? And why is that picture with my file? Emily felt the ground shift beneath her. There was something far bigger going on than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about the letters anymore. It wasn't just about a mystery unfolding in front of her. No. This was something personal. Something tied to her, to Sarah, to both of them. And the answers they were desperately searching for were closer than they realized. But the more they uncovered, the more dangerous the truth became. Who could they trust now? Was everyone around them a part of this intricate game? And what were they really up against? Emily looked up at Sarah, her mind swirling. There was no turning back now. The more they dug, the deeper they'd sink into whatever this was. And whatever the truth was, it would change everything. As the hours passed, the feeling of dread only grew stronger. Emily couldn't shake the weight of the photograph Sarah had shown her, the one where her younger self stood among people she didn't recognize. It was as if her entire life was a story she hadn't written, a narrative that someone else had orchestrated without her consent. The cold wind of uncertainty seemed to swirl around her, making everything feel more surreal by the minute. But the more she tried to push the unsettling thought from her mind, the more it gnawed at her. She was being watched. Someone had been watching her for a long time, and now, there was nowhere to hide. By the time Emily walked back to her apartment, the streets were quieter than usual. The usual hum of the city had faded into a muffled, distant murmur. The city felt empty, like it had been drained of all life, leaving only shadows and echoes behind. She turned the corner onto her block and noticed something strange. The streetlight that usually flickered on the corner was off, casting her building in near-total darkness. It was the kind of detail you would never notice unless you were paying attention. But tonight, every small thing felt significant, every detail amplified by the heaviness of what she was uncovering. She reached her apartment and froze in place. The door to her apartment was ajar. It wasn't wide open, but enough for her to see a sliver of darkness where the door should have been completely shut. Her breath caught in her throat. No one should have had access to her apartment. The lock was solid, and she always made sure to double-check it before leaving. Panic surged through her chest as she slowly approached the door, every step feeling like an eternity. She was about to push the door open when a loud bang echoed from inside her apartment, making her flinch. Someone was in there. She had no doubt about it now. She didn't think, she just acted. The adrenaline kicked in, and before she could second-guess herself, she rushed forward and threw the door open, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might burst from her chest. The apartment was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. She scanned the room quickly, her eyes darting from corner to corner, trying to make sense of what was happening. But everything looked normal, too normal. No signs of forced entry. No obvious disruptions. But Emily knew better now. She had learned the hard way that nothing was as it seemed. Her gaze fell to the coffee table, where her phone lay, face down. She'd left it charging there earlier, but now it was positioned slightly off-center, as if someone had moved it. Emily picked it up cautiously and turned it over. There was a new message. The sender was unknown, no name, no number. Just a string of cryptic words. They're watching you. It's already too late. Trust no one. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen, her pulse racing. Was it a threat? Another warning? Whoever had sent this message knew things about her that no one else could have known. The paranoia was creeping in, and she was starting to feel the full weight of the danger she was in. She had been playing a game with forces far beyond her understanding, and now the stakes were higher than she could have imagined. Just as she was about to turn and check the other rooms of her apartment, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text message, it was a call. The caller ID read Sarah. Emily's stomach twisted. Why was Sarah calling now, and why hadn't she answered her earlier texts? She quickly swiped to answer, trying to steady her breathing. Sarah, Emily said, her voice shaky. What's going on? I just got. The line went dead. Emily froze, her blood running cold. She stared at the phone, unsure if what had just happened was some kind of glitch or if it was deliberate. There was no mistaking it, someone was trying to keep her from getting answers. But the real terror hit when she heard it, a faint noise coming from the hallway. It was a soft shuffle, the kind of sound you'd expect if someone was walking lightly, trying to stay hidden. Her mind raced. She wasn't alone. She wasn't safe. Panic set in as she moved toward the front door, trying to decide if she should bolt or if she should stay put and wait for the intruder to make a move. The sound grew louder, closer. And then, suddenly, there was a knock, sharp and demanding, on her door. Her heart nearly stopped. It was too controlled, too deliberate. The knock wasn't random. It was a message. A reminder. You're not in control here. Without thinking, Emily backed away from the door, her breath shallow. She glanced around for something, anything, to defend herself with. Her hands shook as she grabbed a lamp off the table. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. She didn't know if she could fight her way out of this, but she had to try. But just as she steeled herself, ready to face whatever or whoever was out there, she heard the knock again, this time with more force. And then a voice, low and almost imperceptible through the wood, cut through the silence. You're running out of time, Emily. The clock's ticking. That voice. It wasn't Sarah's. It wasn't anyone she recognized. It was a stranger, someone who knew her name, someone who had been watching her all along. The realization hit her hard. Whoever was behind all of this was closing in. They were always one step ahead, always controlling the narrative, and now they had her exactly where they wanted her. Emily's hands were clammy as she fumbled for her phone again, dialing Sarah's number with shaking fingers. The line rang and rang, but there was no answer. No response. Desperation clawed at her. Something was horribly wrong, and she was powerless to stop it. That's when her phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. A new message, this time from an unknown number. She opened it with dread, and as she read the words, a cold wave of terror washed over her. Look outside. Emily's blood ran cold, but she didn't hesitate. She rushed to the window, pulled back the blinds, and froze. There, standing in the middle of the street, was a figure. A tall silhouette, shrouded in darkness, staring directly at her apartment. Their face was obscured, hidden in the shadows. But there was no mistaking it, they were watching her. Waiting. The weight of everything hit her all at once. The letters. The strange messages. Sarah's disappearance. The cryptic warnings. This wasn't just a game anymore. Someone was hunting her. Someone who knew exactly what she was trying to uncover, and they weren't going to let her get any closer to the truth. Her heart pounded in her chest as the reality set in. She had no idea who was behind this. She didn't know what they wanted. But she knew one thing for sure, she was in serious danger. And she was running out of time. The figure outside her apartment had been standing there for what felt like hours, unmoving, its presence like a weight pressing down on her chest. Emily couldn't tear her eyes away from the window, every nerve on edge, as if the figure could sense her watching. Her mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. Should she run? Should she hide? But then a cold realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. There was no escape. Whoever was out there knew exactly where she was. They were waiting for something. Waiting for her to make a move. But then, just as quickly as the figure had appeared, it was gone. Vanished into the night. Emily blinked, unsure if she had imagined it or if it had been some kind of twisted game, but when she peered out again, there was no trace of the figure. No shadow, no sign that anyone had been standing there at all. Her mind, already frayed from the unrelenting tension, started to unravel. What had just happened? Was it another mind game? Had someone been manipulating her all along, playing on her fear? As she stepped back from the window, her phone buzzed again, pulling her attention back to reality. She grabbed it with trembling hands, heart hammering, convinced it would be another threat. But when she looked at the message, her stomach dropped. "You don't know who you're really dealing with, Emily." It was from an unknown number, just like the others. But this one had a twist. There was a photo attached. At first, she thought it was just another random image, but when she tapped it to enlarge it, her breath caught in her throat. It was a photo of her. But not just of her, it was a picture of her standing in the park, arms around Sarah. The photo was old, grainy, and faded, but that wasn't the worst part. There, in the background of the photo, was a familiar face, a man she hadn't seen in years. It was Daniel, her ex. The one person from her past she had tried to forget. Daniel. Why was he in the photo? And why had he been following her? The questions slammed into her, relentless and sharp, but the most unsettling thought of all was the realization that the picture had been taken just days ago, long after they had broken up. Her mind raced. How could it be? How could Daniel be involved in this, especially after all this time? The familiar ache of betrayal surged within her. Daniel had been part of her life for years, and after their breakup, she had sworn to move on, to never look back. But now, seeing his face again, she couldn't ignore the unease creeping in. What did he know? Why had he been lurking in the shadows, watching her from afar? And why had he sent this message? She was on the verge of calling him, demanding answers, but then she remembered something crucial. She hadn't heard from Sarah in hours. Emily had been so consumed by the mystery, by the fear of the unknown, that she had ignored all the warning signs. Sarah had disappeared, just as Emily's life was spiraling out of control. The letters. The strange messages. The threats. But what if Sarah wasn't just a victim in all of this? What if, just like Daniel, she had been hiding something all along? What if Sarah was part of the conspiracy, playing her part in the elaborate ruse? The thought made Emily's stomach twist with nausea. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a cryptic message or a random number, it was a call. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and Emily's heart leapt. Finally. She quickly answered, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Sarah. Where have you been? What's going on? I got your message. What happened? I need to know." But it wasn't Sarah's voice on the other end. It was a cold, familiar voice that made her blood run cold. "Hello, Emily." Daniel's voice came through the phone, smooth and calm. Too calm. "I see you've been busy." Her hand shook as she gripped the phone tighter, not sure if she wanted to hang up or hear what he had to say. "What do you want from me, Daniel? Why are you doing this?" "Doing this?" He chuckled softly. "No, Emily. The question is, why are you doing this? You've been playing a dangerous game for too long, and now you're in too deep. But you already know that, don't you? You've already made your choice." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Her thoughts raced, but they were too tangled, too chaotic to make sense of anything. "What are you talking about? What do you mean, I've made my choice? You really don't get it, do you?" Daniel's voice was suddenly sharper, more menacing. "You were never supposed to find out. You were never supposed to remember." Remember? The word echoed in her mind like a drumbeat, each repetition sending a ripple of confusion through her. What did Daniel mean by remember? Emily couldn't recall anything she had forgotten. Her memories, as fractured as they were, felt intact except for the ones that didn't make sense. The gaps, the things that didn't quite add up, the nagging feeling that there was something missing. It all clicked into place, suddenly, and the weight of the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. This whole time, she had been playing into a trap, but not because she was being manipulated from the outside. No, Emily had been part of this all along. She had been chosen. She had been placed in the middle of this web, unknowingly playing her role. The missing pieces of her past, the photograph, Sarah's strange behavior, and even Daniel's cryptic words, they all pointed to one terrifying truth: Emily's entire life had been orchestrated by someone else. Someone who had known her better than she knew herself. But the truth wasn't just about manipulation. It was about control. It was about the fact that Emily wasn't who she thought she was. She wasn't the innocent bystander. She was the key to something much bigger, something that went deeper than she could ever imagine. And now, everything, her friends, her relationships, her past, was a lie. "Don't you want to know the truth, Emily?" Daniel's voice taunted her again. "You think you're in control, but you never were. Not really. You're just a part of something much bigger. And the truth will set you free, but not in the way you think. No, you can't, this isn't possible. You can't be part of this. You." But Callahan was already stepping forward, his face hardening into something that was no longer familiar, no longer human. "You never had a choice, Emily. You've been part of the plan all along. This was always going to happen." In that moment, Emily knew there was no one left she could trust. No one was who they seemed. The conspiracy had its claws deep in every corner of her life. And now, the walls were closing in. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. "Get out," she demanded, her voice growing stronger as adrenaline kicked in. But Callahan only smiled, a cruel, empty smile that made her blood run cold. "I'm afraid it's too late for that," he said, his words final, sealing her fate. And just like that, the walls of her world crashed down, and Emily was left standing in the wreckage, realizing that the truth she'd been chasing was far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The stakes were higher than ever. And this time, the game had changed. The room was thick with the heavy weight of silence, the tension palpable. Emily stood there, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps, as the full weight of everything she'd discovered, the conspiracy, the lies, the betrayal, pressed down on her chest like an iron vice. Detective Callahan, the man she had trusted more than anyone, stood before her, a cold, calculating look in his eyes, as if this moment had been scripted long ago. The walls of the apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like they were closing in on her, and the world outside seemed a distant memory, a place she could never return to. "Why?" she whispered, the word barely escaping her lips. "Why did you do this? Why me?" Callahan didn't immediately respond. His face was unreadable, his movements controlled, as though every action, every word, was a calculated part of some grand scheme. It took him a moment, but when he finally spoke, his voice was devoid of any emotion, as if he were reciting a line from a script. "You were always part of this, Emily. You just didn't know it." He stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. "You thought you were trying to uncover the truth, but the truth has always been right in front of you. You were never meant to know. The people you thought were on your side, they were all working for the same thing. You were just too close to the answer." Her pulse hammered in her ears, the room spinning as she processed his words. Everything she had fought for, every sleepless night spent chasing leads, it had all been part of a trap. The clues, the messages, the faces that had turned into strangers, everything had been manipulated from the start. She had been nothing more than a pawn in a game she couldn't even comprehend. "No," Emily's voice cracked, her fists clenched at her sides, her mind reeling. "You're lying. This wasn't just some game. This was real. People are dead because of this. People were hurt." The anger, the hurt, it surged up inside of her like a wave crashing against a cliff, and for a brief moment, she felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't going to let him twist the truth anymore. She wasn't going to be a victim. Callahan's lips curled into a thin, almost amused smile. "You still don't get it, do you?" He took another step toward her, his voice low and dangerous. "This was never about you, Emily. This was never about your life or your death. It's bigger than that. You were just a piece of a much larger plan. A plan that's been in motion for years. And now," he paused, letting the silence hang between them like a dark cloud. "Now, it's too late for you." The air felt heavier now, the words hanging over her like a noose. Emily could feel the walls pressing in on her, the weight of everything crashing down on her. She wasn't sure if it was the adrenaline or the reality of what was happening that made her heart beat so fast, but in that moment, something snapped inside of her. She wasn't going to stand there and let Callahan control the narrative. She wasn't going to let him win. With a sudden movement, she darted toward the desk in the corner of the room, her eyes scanning for anything that could help. Her fingers brushed over a stack of papers, a thick folder she hadn't noticed before. Her heart skipped a beat as she flipped it open, the contents spilling across the desk like a horrifying truth she had been too blind to see. Photographs. Documents. Evidence that, if she pieced it together, would finally make sense of everything that had happened and everyone involved. Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages, each one revealing more than she could have imagined. There were names, dates, locations, everything tied together by one chilling common thread. The conspiracy wasn't just some faceless group of people, it was organized. The strings were pulled by people with power, people in positions that made them untouchable. This wasn't just about secrets anymore. This was about control. About manipulating entire systems, entire lives, to feed their own twisted agendas. And right there, on the last page, was the final piece of the puzzle, a name that made her blood run cold. Sarah. The shock hit her like a punch to the gut. She had trusted Sarah. She had thought of her as a friend, someone who had been caught in the same web of lies. But the truth was worse than anything she could have imagined. Sarah had been working for them all along. She had been feeding information to Callahan. She had played Emily from the start. Sarah, Emily whispered, her mind racing to process everything. You were never my friend, were you? Callahan's smile widened, as if the truth had finally dawned on her. She wasn't, Emily. None of them were. You were always meant to be a part of the plan, just like the rest of them. He took another step forward, his presence looming over her. The truth is, you've been chasing shadows, and now you're finally starting to understand the bigger picture. It's a game, Emily. And you lost. The words hit her like a brick, but there was something in the way Callahan spoke, something that made her pause, that made her question everything she thought she knew. He wasn't just the mastermind of some petty scheme. He was a cog in a much larger machine, and now Emily was caught in its gears, unable to escape. But then, just as she was beginning to lose all hope, something shifted. Something inside of her clicked into place. Emily wasn't just a pawn anymore. She wasn't going to let herself be another casualty in this twisted game. Her eyes locked onto the phone on the desk, the one she'd been ignoring for so long, and a wave of realization hit her. In one swift motion, she grabbed the phone and slammed it against the desk, watching as the screen shattered into 1,000 pieces. In that moment, she felt something break inside of her. She was done being manipulated. She was done being a puppet in their game. Do you really think you have control over me, Callahan? Emily's voice was steady now, filled with a resolve she hadn't felt before. You think you've won, but you've underestimated me. And now you've made a huge mistake. Callahan's smirk faltered for a moment, but it was enough. Emily took a step forward, the pieces of the puzzle now clicking together in her mind. The truth wasn't just about uncovering the past, it was about rewriting the future. And in that moment, she knew what she had to do. She wasn't going to let Callahan or anyone win. But before she could act, the door slammed open, and in rushed a figure she hadn't seen in days. It was Sarah, but she didn't look the same. She wasn't the person Emily had once called a friend. She was cold, detached, and her eyes held nothing but calculation. Emily, don't do this, Sarah's voice was sharp, commanding. You're making a mistake. For a split second, Emily hesitated. The betrayal, the hurt, it was overwhelming. But then, as Sarah's hand moved toward the gun hidden in her jacket, the truth became clear. This wasn't just about revenge or power. This was about survival. With everything on the line, Emily made her choice. The sound of the gunshot was deafening. The sound of the gunshot echoed in Emily's ears as the world seemed to freeze. Time slowed, the air thick with tension as she looked down at the crumpled figure on the floor. Sarah. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, everything had led to this. Emily's hand shook as she stood there, her chest rising and falling in rapid breaths, her mind racing to make sense of everything that had just happened. For a moment, She wasn't sure whether she had made the right choice. The weight of the gun in her hand, the finality of it, settled over her like a heavy cloak. But deep down, she knew. She had done what needed to be done. Sarah, the person she had trusted above all others, had been a part of something far bigger than Emily could have ever imagined, a machine that had been churning for years, manipulating everything and everyone in its path. And now, with Sarah gone, the game had shifted. But was it over? Emily's eyes lingered on Sarah's motionless body for a moment longer, before she turned, the adrenaline still pumping through her veins. There was no time to process the loss, the grief, the overwhelming sense of everything that had been stolen from her. Because, in that moment, there was something far more pressing on her mind. She had to finish what she started. She had to find the truth, even if it meant facing the very darkness that had consumed her life. The answers were still out there, hidden beneath layers of deceit, woven into the fabric of the conspiracy that had taken hold of her world. And as much as she had lost, there was still something in her heart that refused to back down. There was still a fight in her. She walked over to the desk, her eyes scanning the remnants of the evidence she had uncovered. The photographs, the documents, the names. It was all still there, but now, with Sarah out of the picture, it felt like she had a chance. The puzzle wasn't completely solved, but it was getting closer. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily could see the path ahead. The storm had passed, the immediate danger was over, but the fight wasn't finished yet. As she sifted through the papers, her eyes fell on something unexpected, a final note, one she hadn't seen before. It wasn't a message from Callahan or Sarah. It wasn't a clue or a warning. It was a simple, almost mundane statement, scrawled in handwriting she didn't recognize. The game never ends. A chill ran down her spine as she stared at the words. Was this a threat? A warning that the conspiracy would rise again? Or was it something else entirely? The question lingered in her mind as the weight of everything she had been through settled in. She was done being a pawn. She was done being manipulated. But was she truly free? The door clicked open behind her, and Emily spun around, every nerve in her body on high alert. But it wasn't Callahan, or any of the other people who had been part of the conspiracy. It was someone else, someone who had been watching from the shadows. A voice spoke from the doorway, calm and collected, though the words were laced with an unmistakable undercurrent of something darker. I thought we could finish this together. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the voice. Daniel. The man she had trusted, the man who had been there, just like Sarah, just like Callahan. He had been part of it all along. And now, standing in front of her, there was no doubt in her mind that the web had not only entangled her, but him as well. She had never fully understood why he had been so distant, so cryptic, but now it was clear. He wasn't just a bystander in this chaos, he was a player in the game too. She took a step back, her fingers tightening around the broken pieces of her phone. You, she whispered, her voice thick with disbelief. You were working for them too? Daniel stepped forward, a quiet smile playing on his lips. I didn't want it to be like this, Emily. I didn't want to deceive you. But the truth is, you've always been a part of this, just like I have. You've been chasing ghosts, trying to fix something that was never broken. The words hit her like a wave. A part of this? Was she doomed to be caught in this never-ending cycle? The game never ended. Did that mean there was no escape? Or was there still hope? She didn't know, and right now, she wasn't sure what she wanted to know anymore. I'm done, she said, the words barely leaving her lips before she felt the weight of them. She was done. Done with the lies. Done with the manipulation. And most of all, she was done letting others control her story. Done. Daniel echoed, a sharp edge creeping into his tone. You think you're done? You think you've won? Emily, you've only just started. The truth of his words settled over her like a cloud. As much as she wanted to leave it all behind, as much as she wanted to walk away and never look back, the reality was that there was no walking away from this. The conspiracy, whatever it was, whoever was behind it, would never truly let go. It was bigger than all of them. And Emily wasn't sure she could fight it on her own. But she knew one thing for certain, she couldn't keep running. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. Emily's mind raced, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, and in the haze of it all, she finally understood. There would be no clear ending. No final battle to be won. This wasn't a simple story of good versus evil, of right versus wrong. This was about survival. About navigating a world where nothing was ever truly what it seemed. And the truth, whatever it was, would always remain elusive. As Emily turned away from Daniel, her mind didn't settle on a neat conclusion. Instead, it was filled with questions that would never be answered, not in a way that would give her the closure she so desperately craved. The conspiracy was still out there, still lurking in the shadows. And Emily, for all her strength and determination, had no idea if she could ever escape it. But she knew she had to keep fighting. She stepped into the night, the air cold against her skin, her breath visible in the dark. The city stretched out before her, a sprawling maze of stories yet to be told, of lives yet to be unraveled. And somewhere, in the heart of it all, the game continued, its rules unclear, its players hidden in plain sight. As she disappeared into the night, one final question lingered in her mind, echoing over and over again: was there ever any escape at all? The game, it seemed, was far from over. And somewhere, out there in the darkness, the pieces were still falling into place.